Nice Speech Lady. Useful resources for medical SLPs. Created by one who is just like you out in the field. Creative, practical, evidence-based resources. Building up, learning from one another.
Hello and welcome back to Nice Speech Lady. My name is Wilson Nice. I'm a speech pathologist and medical SLP, and I'm the owner of Nice Speech Lady, which is a medical SLP website devoted to the SLP who's making it out there and trying to find resources to help augment what you're doing in therapy. So please check out the website, nicespeechlady.com. I have a host of resources that I've created myself and that I use in my clinical practice, very practical, effective resources, many of them based in evidence-based practice and very much helpful. A lot of them also are just printable and functional at the same time. I would also like to ask you to stay tuned to the rest of the show because we have Walt Fritz joining us, and Walt is going to be talking about research from that has come out this year and how it relates to manual therapy, which is his area of expertise. So please join us for that interview that's coming up. Before we transition to that, however, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about just being the sole SLP in a building. If any of you are the sole SLP in a building, if you're covering the caseload by yourself, if you're covering your own vacations on your own, if you're trying your best to manage the caseload on your own, I just want to give a shout out to you for doing what you're doing and managing what you're managing and taking care of the patients how you're taking care of the patients. And I just want to tell you, good job, and I'm proud of you. And if there's something that we can do here at Nice Speech Lady to assist you, please reach out to the Contact Us button of the Nice Speech Lady website. And to encourage you today, I have a quote. So the sun is alone too, and it still shines. And how does it do that? Well, it has to find a way to replenish itself. It has to find a way to get its reserve back. And so we have to take care of our bodies. We have to take time to feed ourselves well, to exercise well, to rest, to have time for leisure, to have time to enjoy ourselves. We have to have balance in our lives. We have to find all of those things so that we can bring to the table when it's time to work. We can bring to the table our best self and our most effective self so that we can give to the session and give to the patients what they need to have their needs met and their goals achieved. So I encourage you to take time to take care of yourself today and make that a priority. And who knows who's watching, right? We're always being viewed upon, and if any of us have children or any of us have other family members, we're modeling for others how to take care of ourselves. So let's continue to show others how to take care of ourselves. And I'm proud of you for what you're doing today, and the little changes you're making today can make a big difference. So proud of you and keep up the good work. I did want to offer to you a new resource that I came out with this week that can hopefully save you some time and make your trainings in your buildings or your homes that you go into a little bit easier and a little bit quicker and more effective. Let's jump on over to Nice Speech Lady and I'll show you this resource that I recently created. So we'll go to Nice Speech Lady. And when you go to Nice Speech Lady, if you go to the homepage slider here, template form for effective trainings on patients with staff, caregivers, families. So this form These forms here, these versions of the forms are for patient-centered training. So these aren't for general trainings on swallowing or general trainings on cognition or communication. This is for something that is specific to one particular patient. So what you'd want to do here at the top of the page is list the topic of the training here in this big space here. And then list out, and this is the form if you're going to print it out and write it in by hand. If you don't have access to a computer, you don't have time to print it off and type it, if you don't have time to type it, you would write in the condition or the symptom that is being addressed with the training, and the purpose of the training is to achieve what objective. Then you would list the equipment that's related to the training. Any information, and this is the meat and potatoes of the training. 5 bullet points here, the main things that need to be included in the training, the main information that you want the caregivers to know about the training, just bullet point, boom, 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 boom. But above that, you know, this information is important for what? For safety, for function, for communication and communication rights, or for some type of effectiveness in some area. And then I have a section for other. If there's another area that I couldn't anticipate that you are doing training on, there would be a blank section there for other. Then if there's a technique or strategy that's being demonstrated, and then there's a return demonstration occurring, here's where the information on that demonstration will be listed and the details stated. Then there's a section for special consideration, you know, if the patient's hard of hearing, visually impaired, if there are attention problems of the patient, just any special things for the caregivers to know about the patient that might be things to consider. And then factors related to staff or the caregivers themselves. So factors related to time constraints, related to staffing, related to things that you'd like the caregivers to do that may be a little bit different than other patients, and it's going to be maybe take a little bit more time for the caregiver. So this is where you would list those factors related to this being a staff training, this being a caregiver training. Sometimes when we do trainings, it's not just a one-way street. It's not just us giving information and the staff member receiving that information in the training. Sometimes it's about us saying, you know, we really need your input. We really need your input in providing information to be added to this communication sheet or this communication device. Would you mind, you know, sitting, you know, tossing me a note and listing ideas to put down? You know, if you could start sending me, you know, listing to me each week the percentages that the patient is eating, you know, I'd really appreciate that information. So just any information that we'd like to receive back from the patient in terms of feedback and how these techniques are going and how these strategies are going, so that we can work together. And if there's more training that needs to be happening, if there's more tweaking that needs to occur in these nuances that happen, something else new pops up. So what kind of input we're needing from the staff member. This section here is for listing the benefits of the techniques, the benefits of the data and the content of the training. You know, why are we doing what we're doing? How is this going to benefit the patient? How is this going to benefit the building? How is this going to benefit the caregiver? So those are all listed. Focusing on blank will likely result in the outcome of blank. So reinforcing why this is important. And this is an opportunity to really put ourselves in the caregiver's shoes and say, caregiver, this is why this is important, and this is why it'll be important to you specifically. This will help achieve something that you care about. Other things to keep in mind: anything that wasn't covered earlier in the sheet, here's that place for anything other that needs to be stated. And this would be, you know, if the patient is highly agitated, or just any other factors that would need to be stated if the patient needs certain types of cues. And then if the caregivers need to report back to the clinician for any reason, if any observe if any symptoms arise, or if certain problems are observed, reporting back to the clinician if certain things are observed. So, and then, or if there are any questions or concerns, and then thanking them for their time, attention, follow through on the content, and then of course thanking them for what they do, thanking them for the follow through on this information, how it's just really important that we work together. And, you know, and I always follow up a training with, is there anything I can do for you? You know, is there anything that you need that I can address? Because I know I'm asking a lot of you. Let me know how I can help you. And then there's a section for signing your name, the role as the clinician, and then the date. And then here's a signature page, you know, the subject of the training, the name of the patient, and then everyone's roles, department, and date. And then a section at the bottom, just if they're signing, they're indicating that they understood the content, that they asked questions if they were indicated, and that they comprehended the information. And then we have information here about families. It's the same form for families. So just something to think about. And then the information is the same, the information is the same, just from a family perspective on asking about content in terms of the role of from a loved one rather than from a caregiver, and input needed from the loved one rather than from the caregiver, and you know, such and such is needed to, you know, achieve what goal of the caregiver, and asking the caregiver, you know, what can I do for you? You know, what are you needing in this moment, and how can we achieve that goal? So hopefully this resource is something that is helpful to you. Hopefully it's something that will benefit you. And if you have any questions about it, please reach out. And hopefully it's something that you can use in your building or in your agency, and it's something that will be helpful. Next, we'll move on to the interview portion of our show. Walt Fritz is a physical therapist from Rochester, New York, and he is been conducting seminars in manual therapy, and he is joining us here today. Thank you for joining us, Walt.
Oh, thanks for having me, Wilson.
So for those that are new to Foundation's work, can you give a brief synopsis of what you do?
Sure. Well, first of all, I am a physical therapist and have a private practice south of Rochester, New York. I see head-to-toe patients in my case as my caseload, but my specialty niche has become, over the last 8 years, teaching to speech pathologists manual therapy for voice and swallowing disorders. And that's become my interest, my passion, and the primary coursework that I teach. So I teach manual therapy, and manual therapy in a very generic format versus how I used to teach, which is myofascial release. And I teach it from a framework that a lot of people struggle with initially. They struggle with it because people walk into my seminar expecting to learn just to be a real skilled hands-on clinician, and which hopefully I'm a part of that. The class is a part of that. But my real objective is to elevate the way you communicate with patients, whether it's through my manual therapy work or possibly any kind of work we do, to a more patient-centered, from a more patient-centered perspective. And that's, I think, what clinicians really struggle with. Maybe not as much people who are new to manual therapy, but clinicians who are experienced with manual therapy, whether it's massage or myofascial release or manual circumlaryngeal treatment, which is often done in a manner that the therapist is the expert. They'll figure out what's wrong with you, and they'll figure out what to do with you, and you just shut up and let me do my work. Well, that's a little bit of an overstatement. There is a lot of sort of a parental approach to traditional manual therapy where they apply what's best as the operator, okay? Versus the patient and myself engaging in an interaction where we're acting as interactors instead of as an interaction, okay? I'm sorry, instead of as that parental approach. And honestly, the coursework that I teach is I just have a blast with it because I teach people to listen more. to listen to their patients, to listen what their patients are saying to them, or maybe aren't saying to them, and trying to figure out ways to get it out of them. And so you asked for probably a one sentence, and I gave you a whole paragraph, but that's who I am.
Well, thank you. So I'm glad you joined us today. We were going to talk about some new studies that have come out, some new publications, and we wanted to just kind of jump right into them. So the first one to talk about is a study that was published actually this year, the Cardoso myofascial release study that looked at posture, muscular tension, and voice quality, the effects of myofascial release on those areas. And so what were your takeaways from that study?
Well, in the past, whenever a study came out of myofascial release, I was just like, great, it's showing the effects of the work that I teach or I used to teach. And while I'm still happy about that, because it often reflects the style of work that I do, because I still teach in that way that I learned with myofascial release, right? The slow, nuanced, gradual stretching versus the manipulation that's so common in voice. And this was a study from the Journal of Voice. Okay, so I have to draw a line. I have great respect for people who take the time, who put it as their career to do research, to publish their research. And I don't want to sound like I'm not respecting that, because I am. But what needs to be done across the board when it comes to voice research, swallowing research, is I think for people to up their game and take a look at some of the new evidence outside of voice, where we're looking at multifactorial perspectives of explaining why manual therapy works, besides the fascia itself, okay? When a study includes words like, we need to harmonize muscle tension, I mean, I feel like we can do better than that. Harmonizing muscle tension is such an ambiguous metaphoric type statement. What does it really mean? And Cardoso is reaching back into the Maseko work. Maseko is an Italian researcher in the fascial field, and he's well known more outside of the United States than in the United States for his work on fascia. And granted, there's some good work on fascia, but what's missing is the broader perspective of, when we touch somebody, can we truly select their fascia for treatment without treating their skin, the surrounding structure, the nervous system, the autonomic system, the contextual factors that are involved. And this is the model that I was trained from, where it's all about the fascia, and you use these buzzwords like the piezoelectric effect and fixotropic effect. I'm sorry, I struggle with that one. Piezoelectric effect is just, it's not been ever proven to affect fascia, but people continue to use it because it exists in the research. And we regurgitate research that's been published as the basis for our study, and then we go ahead with the study, basically validating based on those past terms. Now, I want to create a wall of separation. The study is about, will changing somebody's posture with the myofascial release work to basically the kind of work that I teach in my class, which is in through this work area and in through the neck area. They're doing the work that I do and teach, but describing it from a fascial perspective. But what they found was that improved maximum phonation time, but not a lot of audit or some of the more acoustic measures. It did improve pain tolerance when they poke at somebody. They also went into one of my pet peeves, the palpation scales, of feeling that somehow our ability to palpate tension is objective. And I take huge issue with that. Even though there's a study by Jafari that says that it is objective, there's a number of studies that truly call into question, is manual palpation for muscle tension an objective rating scale when you don't take into account the normal variations in tension in the human being? Some people are tight, some people are loose. That doesn't mean there's a dysfunction present, okay? So I had a lot of problems with the introductory piece, as well as some of the rating scales, but I enjoy that they're talking about my work. They're talking about the way that I see the work being translated to the public, and that it can affect posture, and it can affect some voice scales in terms of maximum phonation time in this particular study, right? And I still like the study. I still like that it's showing that we can be useful parts of this whole process of working with the voice patient, working with the swallowing patient, et cetera. I just have some my normal issues with the way the study was conducted, as well as how they explained the background material.
What would be a more effective way to measure between the two groups? You know, what would be some better objective measures?
Well, I think that the objective measurements that they use, which are the grade and roughness scale, the, I'm sorry, I'm looking down as I talk about this. Some of the other internal scales within the speech pathology community that you use for voice, those are absolutely fine measurements. I just, I am in a minority here that does not feel that muscle tension in and of itself can be used as a objective grading. Well, if we're going to allow the 0 to 10 pain scale to be used as an objective scale, I guess that we have to allow muscle tension rating scales. But there is so much overlap from the clinician being the observer there and their own biases, right? We cannot remove our biases from the fact that I touched somebody before and I did something and I touched somebody after. I have internal biases which say that this person should feel better. And therefore, I believe it's impossible for me to remove myself, as I can't be a third party and come in and check this person to say, are they truly different? And if you could do a true blinding, I don't even think it's possible then, because even if the person did change, my big problem is it because the fascia changed, which are the implications of this paper? Or did we affect autonomic tone, autonomic balance? Did we create brain-centered, top to bottom type approaches that created that change in tension? Well, I'm not going to argue that you can't use it as at least part of your in the moment type of assessment. You really have to ask yourself, even if the tension changes, why did that tension change? And that's this is my biggest pet peeve, is the lack of an adequate mechanism of action that explains it beyond the historical fascial merit perspectives and moves it into the future. And hopefully I'll be having my name on a paper kind of soon too that maybe talks to that. Moving forward this narrative from muscle tension, fascial restrictions into something that reflects really what's becoming the mainstream in the general manual therapy research community that is still lagging behind in the voice community. But that being said, I don't want to be disrespectful at all. I do think, though, it's okay to question what's being talked about, what's being said, and what's being concluded.
Well, let's move on to the next study. The next one that we decided we were going to talk about is the Buscemi study from this year on tongue stretching, a technique and clinical proposal. And this is not research. This is, well, it does talk about some information, but it's more
Right.
of a description article. What were your takeaways from this publication?
Well, you're right. This is almost like a pre-study type of study, because they do talk about from this information, take it to a larger group of people. I feel kind of bad here because I think the two papers that we landed upon are the two papers that I might have the most issues with. I'm really happy to see people talking about, can a manual therapeutic intervention to the tongue and the tongue region, can it improve certain parameters, certain qualities? The qualities, you know, there's really not anything from an objective testing perspective that they're really looking at here. They're talking about tongue positioning. I apologize, I have to look back for a second to, you know, they're talking about a technique to reset the deep tongue receptors. That's pretty ambiguous when it comes to the introductory material in the study. They're looking for tongue muscle normalization techniques. And I'm guessing if they convert this to an actual study, that we'll read more about it. I love doing tongue work. I enjoy being with somebody's tongue and doing various maneuvers directly on the tongue, certainly working the infrahyoid region, working the region of the hyoid, working the sublingual, subventral region. My biggest issue with this study is the aggressiveness that's used. While it's the norm in certain populations, especially coming from more of an osteopathic approach to this work, to more from the, okay, so I got to read your sentence. Okay, excuse me here. The operator, and right there kicks it off right there because they're using the phrasing of the person in charge applying the technique. And I get it, that's the way we talk about this stuff, but that implies the patient has no say, right? It's one person doing the intervention, the other receiving it. But the operator will basically what they're doing is they're holding onto somebody's head with one hand, and then they're grabbing hold of the hyoid, and then they're doing this.
With the tongue stuck,
with the tongue no, they only, yeah, that I don't like too. They didn't explain. They say, okay, they ask the patient to stick their tongue out, and then they bite on their tongue as a means to relax the tongue. I need more information on that one. I need a reference. I need to say, okay, why, how, prove it, okay? But basically the person is holding on their tongue as sort of holding to one end, which is a little frightening because if the operator, if the clinician is thrusting too hard, I could see that person maybe biting their tongue. Maybe not, okay? Maybe I'm just being a little bit overly dramatic about it. But basically, patients got their tongue stuck out with their biting on it. And the clinician is essentially grabbing the hyoid and thrusting it downward, providing a very quick aggressive stretch to the other end of the tongue musculature. The kicker in this study is that you're supposed to do it. You want to make sure the traction is well tolerated by the patient to not stimulate a sense of cough or a sense of vomiting. Now, okay, sure, we got to be concerned about that, but would you really want to do something where you're taking the patient to possibly the end of vomiting? I'm sure it's effective. I know the clinicians use this more aggressive work, but do you have to work so aggressively? Could you do the same technique, even holding the tongue with the bite mechanism, and simply take the hyoid and provide a more prolonged stretch? It's out of the perspective of some clinicians to do slow work. If you've been taught you always want to manipulate the soft tissue. But gosh, there are just so many other ways to do things and other ways that the patient can be totally present without fearing vomiting, okay? I really give credit to this group of clinicians who wrote this preliminary study up, and I'm sure they're seeing positive outcomes. But when stuff like this gets published, I think a budding clinician is going to say, okay, in order to affect the tongue, we need to beat the crap out of it and take the patient to almost vomiting to have effect on tongue tension and tongue resting position. And I'm sorry, I do not buy that at all. I don't accept that. There are other ways to do the work.
Well, in reading this study, the first thought that came to my mind was the Maseko maneuver, which is, one of the exercises that we do as SLPs. And I thought, well, maybe that's what they're going for with the tongue out. But there really wasn't a discussion about that. And so I was kind of, left wondering what the purpose of that was.
Yeah. And even the Maseko, again, it has efficacy. It's got evidence to support it. What's the purpose behind the Maseko? Can you just tell me that briefly? Is it to strengthen, to stretch? What is it?
Well, it's to strengthen and it's to stretch as well. And
right.
And to work on laryngeal elevation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so again, there's so many ways to do this because when I do my tongue work, I'm transitioning from calling this stuff techniques into more of a process, a patient process. Right, when we engage the tongue in a light traction, we're doing stretching. The patient's brain is participating in the process. I believe, are doing strengthening because, again, the old world view of strengthening is the muscle itself somehow gets stronger when we lift weights. The muscle grows and builds and is better capable of performing a function. But there is so much research out there to show that the effects of exercise may be more up here than they are here or in the tongue. There's a lovely paper that I include in the bibliography of my classes called The Neurophysiology of Exercise that shows that within 5 days of starting a novel exercise, you can see demonstrable changes in brain function based on MRIs, that the brain is basically reforming the plasticity of the nervous system when we start a novel exercise. And that brain function is a huge part of why the tongue is more effective versus that silo-based thought that somehow the tongue is stronger or somehow the tongue is longer or stretchy. And I think, again, that's moving the bar from how we used to view things into this very complex and fuzzy multifactorial explanation that's truly where we should be heading with this research. And we should be heading as clinicians, explaining a work instead of, let me go back into the PT world and say, your core is weak, we need to strengthen it so you can stabilize yourself better and you have less back pain. And I'm sorry, that just is not true. It's not the whole truth. There's so much up here. There's so much around us from contextual factors, et cetera, that play a role. Is to dumb it down to say, we're making the tongue stronger by you resisting, and it's somehow going to become a more, the muscle fibers are going to become better able to contract. It's a lot more complex than that.
And that's one of the things I love about your courses is how it opens my mind to things that I haven't, seen before in other opportunities for education. And actually, I'm going to be joining you next month at one of your new courses that you're offering. Can you talk about that course?
Yeah, one more statement before I go on to that. Causation is messy. Causation is complex. When we talk about causation as being you're weak or you're tight, you are just dumbing down the process so much, because causation is not only about the biology, but it's about the dispositions of the individual patient that we need to take into consideration. And we need to do ourselves the favor and begin to elevate our own game to understand the complexity of causation, the complexity of the effects of our interactions. And I don't mean to be like lecturing people at all, but that's kind of what I've been holding myself to the last decade, is to elevating my own game, to move beyond explaining it. Your fascia is tight, we're releasing the fascia, and that's why you feel better, okay? Balancing the body, yeah, thank you, I'm teaching it 3 times this year, and then again next year. It's a new class, and what I've done is I've taken a lot of feedback from speech pathologists, voice clinicians, in terms of, this is good work that we learn in this class, but we also have interest in posture, and I'm going to air quote it, posture with a small p versus a big P. The concept of altering posture certainly can improve voice, can improve swallowing, can improve breathing, but yet you got to watch your boundary that poor posture does not necessarily mean you will develop a voice problem or develop neck pain, etc. You have to draw the line there. That I work from posture from a perspective of, I don't want to put a person in an optimal position. I want to give them the ability to have a variety of positions, to allow them to move more freely so they, at will, whether it's consciously or subconscious, can change the way their body is held. And whether it's for an improvement in swallow or voice or breathing, or whether it's to give themselves a break from a position that may lead to pain if they didn't change that position. Again, the simplicity of posture is, we need to put you in this place where everything is stacked for optimal alignment. And they use that in Cardoso's study to a lot of the old cliches about posture that allows you to work more efficiently, which there is some evidence to say that's true, but we will never get everybody in perfect position or optimal position. So in that class we start at the neck, we do some interesting neck work, which is some of my favorite work for this work. Work our way down to the torso, front and back, the diaphragm region, and including the pelvic floor based on some of the literature in the speech pathology journals recently about pelvic floor, et cetera. So we do that. It's a blended class like my voice and swallowing class, but I have massage therapists attending the class. I have physical therapists attending the classes. And we're kind of taking, I don't want to be trying to make it a class for everybody, but yet it's the same work. We just do it for different reasons. So it's going to be a fun class, a 2-day class. And my first presentation officially is in Iowa in 2.5 weeks, and then Santa Fe the next week. I done it once earlier this year just to sort of figure out my timing on it and everything. And next year we're going to be actually doing some fun stuff where my first one announces I'm teaching in Chicago, I think in May, and I'm going to be doing back-to-back. We're doing the voice and swallowing class, immediately followed by the balancing the body class. And, we'll see if some people stick around for all 4 classes, or all 2 classes, 4 days, and some may, some won't, but we'll see how it goes. I'm kind of excited to be able to bring that, and that class is approved for ASH's CEUs as well. So again, it's presented in and from the context of the speech pathologist. So hopefully it'll be worthy of your consideration.
And folks that are interested in that course can still get a 10% discount off if they use the Nice Speech Lady phrase in the at the checkout.
Yep. And if you have problems with that code, just let me know, because I can always help you through that process. But yeah, appreciate your support for my classes as well, Wilson. So.
And tell us what is coming up for you down the pike this year, next year. What's new for you?
Like I mentioned earlier, hopefully when I get a few seconds to edit a paper that I'm doing, that I had written recently, we're going to hopefully submit for publication a paper on moving the narrative forward in terms of that multifactorial explanation. I wrote the paper from the context of voice for a program that I'm involved with, but I'm going to edit that and hopefully get that submitted and maybe published within the next year or two. I don't know how long it takes, but I'm also in the closing processes of finishing a book manuscript for Compton Publishing for a book that hopefully will come out early next year called Manual Therapy in Voice and Swallowing. We just did our major photo shoot yesterday, so that was a lot of fun. It's going to be about 50%, a lot diving deep into the context of looking at how manual therapy has been explained in the past and how hopefully we can move that forward. I get a chance to sort of nerd out and really expand and talk about this whole approach that I use, not only from the hands-on approach, but from the behavioral aspects that I think are present in the work that I teach. And it's also going to be a pretty comprehensive manual, if you will, introducing some of the techniques certainly that I teach in my voice and swallowing class, some of the techniques that I teach in the New Balancing the Body class, but also is going on from there too. Can you teach techniques in a book? I don't know. I used to think you couldn't teach techniques, or I got to get rid of that word, processes online, but I have an online course now for speech pathologists. I hope at least that people can gain value from it, whether it becomes something to learn things from in terms of how to apply it, or maybe taking a deeper dive into why we need to move things forward and how we explain manual therapy to ourselves, to other professionals, as well as to the public. So hopefully that book will be out if I get my butt going and get it finished by my deadline. Hopefully it'll be out early next year. So watch for that. And what else? I'm still seeing patients here at my practice. I'm traveling a lot. COVID is doing what COVID is doing, and we're staying safe and making sure that we've got precautions in place. I've canceled a couple seminars because they're in hot zones, et cetera. And it's just, it's just trying to keep all the balls in the air as we juggle our way through life. That's what's going on in my life. So.
And for those, it sounds like you're really busy. For those who are interested in your online course, what's the time commitment for that?
Time commitment is, I have an intro class that's a 2-hour course, but that intro class is rolled right into the full 8-hour online hands-on course, which takes you in 2 hours of introduction to the evidence to support the work, as well as the evidence and the concepts behind my own patient-centered approach. And then what that online course does is essentially, it takes you through the entire live course, of course, in a much more abbreviated fashion. And, for those of you who can't or right now choose not to travel or are in a location that I'm not readily coming to, the online course has been pretty popular over the past year since I've gotten it out there. And the feedback's been nice. I think people still benefit from coming and taking a live class when they get the opportunity, because there is mentoring and tutoring that happens from that hands-on perspective. Is not just the hands-on perspective, but also being able to be in the moment with learning how to talk to each other, how to talk to the patient, how to pull information out of them. That's not always the easiest thing, that is probably best learned in a live environment. But that is out there, and it's been pretty popular over the past year in terms of people who's wanting to get a taste of the work.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to add that I didn't ask you about today, Walt?
Well, I seldom leave the interviewer time to talk because I know that I am relatively chatty, but no, I think is it from my end. Do you have any things that are burning in your brain that you want to ask me or yell at me for or anything like that? I take criticism pretty well.
Well, I'm just thrilled you're coming back to New Mexico next month, and I'll get to see you again. And
yeah.
We've been so appreciative of having your information available to the readers at Nice Beach Lady. And we just encourage everyone to check out your website. If you could go ahead and state your website for everyone.
Oh, sure. Yep. It's waltfritz.com. It's pretty simple, waltfritz.com. And that'll lead you to the main page. And, all the classes are there. There's also a ton of podcasts posted there, some that we've done, podcasts that I've done with other speech pathologists for voice and swallowing, the general massage and manual therapy community. And there's also a really cool podcast that I did with the author of The Cause Health Perspective in Norway, talking about moving the biopsychosocial approach on basically to the next level, because biopsychosocial approach, evidence-based model are all framed from basically RCTs. How do we look at a large group, come up with evidence like these that applies to a large group? But what the Cause Health Perspective is trying to do is trying to move it on to the individual, the unique and complex individual. And I had a really nice long talk with Ronnie Lille-Anjum, philosopher from Norway, who was the key author in this book, as well as my friend Stephen King from the UK, about applying those concepts to our work in manual therapy. And it was a fun exchange. It was a long exchange. It's well over an hour long talk. But if you're interested in some of these newer concepts, that might be a podcast you want to listen to. But there's tons of videos and articles I've written, my opinions on many things, and I have strong ones. So, yeah.
So check out Walt's website. Also, you've authored several guest blogs on Nice Beach Lady. And so check those out, readers and listeners. And just want to thank you, Walt, for your time today. It was early for me.
Yeah.
Today. Early morning to catch you when you're available and I'm available at the same time. But thank you for your time, and I guess we'll see you next month.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Always a pleasure to have Walt join our show. Always great food for thought. Really appreciate him for joining us. Thanks again. And thank you for joining us today. Please join the Facebook group SLP Support and Nice Beach Lady. Request and answer the membership questions to join. Also, please like the page Nice Beach Lady, the Facebook page. And please reach out. And also find us on Instagram, find us on Twitter, and please subscribe to this channel, as well as subscribing at nicebeachlady.com. And shout out to the service members out there. Please hug a veteran and thank them for their service. And a shout out to my son who's overseas. We appreciate your service and we love you. We miss you. And for all of you who are starting out this week, I hope it's a great week for you, and keep shining. Have a great one. Bye-bye.